Path Media.
Are Mon Mothma's husband and daughter the complete a-holes that they're portrayed to be? Or is there some other family dynamic that we're not seeing, that we're not exposed to? You're listening to
Path of the Jedi
with your host, Ronnie Cruz. All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. My name is Ronnie Cruz, your host for this eye-opening adventure. That's right, eye-opening. Because number one, this episode of Andor that we're going to be talking about today, episode 6, is actually titled The Eye. That's right, The Eye. But also, too, because this entire journey so far with Andor and you know, going through analysis and watching and rewatching for themes and stuff like that for the show here for Path of the Jedi, it's really been an eye-opening adventure for me. I feel like my perspective as a result of the analysis, as a result of really looking at this show and the characters and the themes very critically, it's expanded my perspective quite a bit. I mean, I really have to admit that I feel like new neural pathways are being created just as a result of watching the show and analyzing it. It's just been an amazing ride. It's a really, really, again, eye-opening ride. I feel like new light. Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. One of the newest light bulbs to turn on for me as a result of watching episode 6 of Andor, The Eye. But before we get into all of that, I do want to, first of all, thank all of you for your patience and allowing me a day grace in releasing this episode. This obviously is a day. This episode, today's show, has been released a day later than normal. I had some circumstances in recording yesterday the day before yesterday that weren't conducive to giving you guys the best quality production. I was feeling under the weather, and so I didn't want to give it a half-assed effort. So I decided to postpone the release of this episode at least a day until everything was better aligned. And so that's why we're here a day late. Again, thank you for your patience and allowing me to do that and giving me the grace to still produce the show, but at a pace that sometimes needs to be adjusted. So thank you so much for your patience. The other thing that I want to talk to you guys about before we get into, the meat and potatoes of today's episode is that I finally have set a hard date, a hard target to start Jedi Academy. That's right, Jedi Academy, in case you haven't heard yet, it's going to be a new segment, kind of a new series for the show here. It'll still be on Path of the Jedi, so don't worry, you don't have to follow a new podcast. It'll be part of this podcast, but it'll be a kind of a new segment, a new series, that focuses more on personal development, right? Like outside of analysis of episodes or analysis of specific scenes or movies and things like that. It'll still be tied to Star Wars, but it'll be heavily focused on personal development. And I wanted to create this series, this segment, because there's still so much that I want to share with you guys. I mean, we are a Star Wars podcast, but we're also a self-development, a personal development podcast, and there's so much that I want to share with you guys in that realm to continue to support you on your growth journey, on your personal development, your personal growth journey. So Jedi Academy, be on the lookout for it. It will be part of this show. It'll be part of Path of the Jedi, just a whole new segment. It'll happen next Monday. And, I don't know how regularly it's going to be at this point just because of the sheer workload that I have in creating content. It's definitely not going to be once a week, at least at the beginning. But just every once in a while, it's going to pop up, Jedi Academy, and that'll give you guys more to listen to from Path of the Jedi, and it'll give you guys more to chew on from a personal development, self-development, side of things. So again, November 7th, next Monday, we will be launching the first ever in the segment called Jedi Academy. Okay, so that's going to do it for today's news and announcements. Let's take a quick break to pay the bills before we dive into today's discussion. I was at an event recently and I heard one of the most incredible stories that I'd heard in a very, very long time. A gentleman got up on stage and he shared how from January 2022 to October of 2022, he had lost over 160 pounds, 160, using the Yoli Transformation Kit. This story was so inspirational. Of course, it's ongoing, right? He's still on a road to better health and he's losing more weight. I wanted to share this story with you because for me, the way I see it, so many things had to line up for this kind of transformation to happen. Number one, somebody had to care enough about him, about his health, about his family, to reach out to him, to offer him this solution. Number two, he had to be ready to hear that message, right? He actually went on to in his story to share that it took almost 6 months of that individual reaching out to him for him to finally say yes. So he had to be ready. He had to be a place in his heart and in his mind to accept that message and to accept the solution. And number three, of course, the system has to work, right? The system has to be effective and the products have to be good. So all these things had to align, and this transformation is a result of that, and it's gone on to inspire so many people to take control of their health, whether or not they have weight to lose, whether or not you have weight to lose. Like I find this story incredibly inspirational and what's possible. So I'm reaching out to you. I'm sharing this message because number one, I care about you, and number two, in case you are in a place in your life that you want to make some changes in your health, you don't have to necessarily have to lose 100 pounds. If you got to shed 5 to 10 pounds, or if you're already healthy like me, I've been on the transformation kit actually for 10 years and I've been incredibly healthy. I feel like I'm getting younger and younger with each year. So wherever you are in your health, if there's some things that you want to change, if there's some adjustments that you want to make, I want to let you know that the Yoli Transformation Kit is a great all-natural solution where you can gain your health back. Right? So if you want to know more, I encourage you to go to pathofthejedi.com/resources and click on transformation to learn more about the Yoli Transformation Kit. Like I said, I've been on these products for more than 10 years, and over those 10 years, I've heard countless stories from individuals whose lives have been absolutely transformed by this amazing system, the Yoli Transformation Kit. Again, if you want to learn more, if you're ready to make a change in your health, go to pathofthejedi.com/resources and click on transformation. All right, Andor episode 6, The Eye. What another incredible episode. This show just does not fail. It delivers. It delivers every time. I have not been disappointed with a single episode. And I know, okay, so I know I say that a lot about everything Star Wars. I do have an incredible passion and love for everything Star Wars. This show in particular, it's just so satisfying. I mean, I guess, it is heavily plot driven, and I'll talk more about that later, but it just gives you all the answers that you want and leaves you wanting more, raises more questions. I talked about that last week. On top of that, the heist that they've been planning for the last 2 episodes, finally, it happens. The big, I don't know, every couple of years ceremony with the eye and, the meteor shower that happens on the planet Aldhani happens. And it's just an incredible episode. There's so much happening. There's so many dynamics going on. And it's just so fun to watch. In reading some of the reactions and the tweets from my fellow Star Wars fans on Twitter, they, without giving any spoilers, because I'm only caught up to episode 6, so I think the show is on episode 9 now. Everyone is saying that it just gets better and better and better. So I'm excited to continue this journey for another however many weeks we have left with Star Wars, with Andor. But again, this episode does not fail. The show has not failed to absolutely deliver the goods. It is so fun to watch. On top of that, okay, so let me backtrack. I get super excited when talking about Star Wars, but in terms of themes, again, because it is very kind of, at least on the surface, very plot driven, I haven't necessarily honed in on specific themes per episode, right? Like on specific lines or quotes or specific character choices or interactions. I feel like my discussions on this show so far have been very kind of broad topics, very big, broad topics, and I think I think that's kind of part of the beauty of this show. Yes, it is very heavily plot driven. What happens that leads to Cassian's joining the rebellion? Because obviously we know that eventually he does join the rebellion, and he becomes integral to overthrowing the first Death Star. So we want to know, like, it's very fun to watch all the plot points and the storyline that happens through there, but in the midst of it all, there's so much humanity, and so many levels of depth to the storytelling, right? To the plot, because interwoven within all of it are these very kind of, I don't know, I think it's very rounded and rich characters. These characters in Andor aren't particularly one-sided, right? I think they're multifaceted, and there's again, there's a certain depth to them that has caused me to talk about this show in very, very broad, broad themes. One of the themes, or the theme that I want to talk about today, is the prevalence of, well, I mean, not really prevalence is the wrong word, but Star Wars, there is a clear kind of delineation between good versus evil, or good versus bad, right versus wrong. I mean, since day one, the original Star Wars, I mean, it's all about light versus dark, right? Good versus bad, Darth Vader versus Luke, or whatever the situation, the rebellion versus the Empire. There was very a clear delineation between good versus evil, right? And I think that permeates throughout all of Star Wars, right? From then until all the assets, all the shows, all the movies, everything Star Wars, even the books, right? There's definitely a clear delineation between good and bad. However, with Andor, oh well, okay, so Andor is no different. Obviously, there's a clear protagonist, and there's a clear antagonist. We see that. I mean, well, okay, so you just talk about the Empire in this particular episode of occupying this amazingly beautiful planet that has a rich religious history, rich spirituality. The native population that are there are very much rooted within the planet, but the planet's being occupied, and they're getting booted off the planet for the most part, and they're getting separated from their ancient traditions because the Empire has decided to use the planet for their own good. So, there's clearly right and wrong in Andor. That delineation that I talked about between good and evil, and right and wrong, bad and good, still exists in Andor. However, I think more than any other, Star Wars media or asset, Andor really blurs the line between the two, between good and bad, between right and wrong, between good and evil. I don't know. I feel like, anyways, in this watching, more than any other Star Wars in the past, right? Because like when you look at it, I mean, not all the antagonists are necessarily completely bad. Right, like if you look at Cyril Karn, at the beginning he seemed to be kind of a jerk, and like who is this dude? Like, why is he so intent on capturing Cassian? But like when we see him, in the subsequent episodes, we see that there's so much more to his story than him just being a bad guy, right? Like obviously he's in this very toxic, if not abusive, relationship with his mother. And so, there's a lot of back history there as to why he is the way he is, and given that depth, given that those layers to his history, we see a little bit more of his humanity. So it's not a clear delineation that he's just the antagonist. There's still so much more to his story, and then flip side of that, the protagonists that we think are the good guys. We see this band of rebels. They're not necessarily. I mean, one of them, Cinta, like she kills without even thinking twice, right? She takes a life without even thinking twice. I mean, we see Cassian. Obviously, he's the model for exactly what I'm talking about, right? He's the epitome of this. Is he good? Is he bad? No, there is no clear delineation. There's definitely a blur with Cassian, and as an extension of that, since he's the central character, this is his story. This show is about him. Everything else in the show really is that like it rides and teeters that blurred line between good and bad, between right and wrong. I mean, even in this episode, towards the end, he flat out just murders a guy, right? Yes, the guy was kind of sticky. He was, he wasn't necessarily a good guy, but Cassian just murders him. And this isn't the first time, nor will it be the last. I mean, obviously, we see him in Rogue One murdering somebody at the very beginning when we first meet him. So, is Cassian a good guy? Is Cassian a bad guy? I think that's an important conversation to have, because is good and bad really that delineated? Star Wars, yes, it might lead you to think that on the surface, especially if you're looking at it from a plot perspective, right? And it needs that storytelling needs protagonist and antagonist for the story to move forward. However, when you look at storytelling, and you could trace this back even to like the hero's journey and all that stuff. That's storytelling, but within that storytelling is again interwoven the depth and layers of characters and what the characters are going through. Are all characters one or the other, or is it more of a mixed line, or is it more of a blurred kind of gray area? Are Mon Mothma's husband and daughter the complete a-holes that they're portrayed to be? Or is there some other family dynamic that we're not seeing, that we're not exposed to, that's created this hostile environment in that home? Obviously, yeah, there's a lot of stuff, backstory that we're not exposed to with Mon Mothma, and what's going on in her house and with her family. However, well, okay, so, we're given what we're given, right? The story and the creators and the writers give us what is pertinent to driving this show forward, especially with Andor being the central character. It may not be pertinent to know what's going on behind the scenes in Mon Mothma's house. However, for me, the question is, from a creator standpoint, where do these ideas come from, right? Yes, they've put this in, and it's had to come from somewhere, right? They've put in the fact that Cyril Karn is in an abusive, mother-son relationship. They've put all these different things in, and it had to come from somewhere. I think, as a creative person, part of the source material, I think a big part of source material is experience and observation, right? And being able to synthesize that into a work of fiction or into any work of art, it's incredible, and to do it well is to show as much layers and as many shades in that work of art or in that work of fiction as possible, and creating something that's not just black and white, right? Creating something that's not just delineated and this is what it is, and this is wrong, this is right, and this is what the story is, right? Spoon feeding you, these things. It doesn't really serve for a very satisfying, watching, viewing, reading experience, and so for Star Wars, especially with this show, they've done such a good job layering all of these things in, that we don't necessarily know on the conscious level that it's happening, because obviously, again, we're seeing the plot. We're seeing, our protagonist versus the antagonist. They're trying to accomplish a mission within these contexts, and there's opposing forces. So there's always going to be this rooting for one side or the other. But again, within that, it layered so richly and deeply and beautifully. There's so much subtext and humanity to it. My point is, from the creative standpoint, if the writers are pulling source material, of these different aspects of relationships and character from experience and from observation, then the stuff that we're seeing in Star Wars, good or bad, evil or kind or whatever these things are, that we place on the spectrum of light versus dark, all of it within Star Wars is a reflection of life, a reflection of us. whether it's good or bad, light versus dark, right versus wrong, rebel versus empire, Jedi versus Sith, all of that's in this fictional world that's partly written from a plot standpoint and story standpoint to oppose each other. All of these things, all of these elements reside and as a reflection of humanity, and therefore a reflection of each and every one of us, and therefore a reflection of what each and every one of us are actually capable of. Yes, of course, we will always generally align with the individual or group that we feel has the moral high ground, right? That we feel is the protagonist in the story. I mean, it's just, again, it's part of the convention of storytelling. However, like Andor, there's much more to it. There's much more depth to just wrong or right, good or bad. The delineation between the two really doesn't exist. And each individual character, especially Andor, is capable of either or. And if you trace it back, to Luke and his journey, well, to any of the Jedi's journey, but especially, Luke being the primary one in the original trilogy, we see his hero journey. He has that within himself too. In Empire, he goes into the cave and he's faced with both his light and his dark side. So it's within all of us. And it wasn't that those early Star Wars things, I don't think, didn't have these layers. It's maybe that I was too young to see them. I see them now. I certainly watch, when I first got exposed to Star Wars, the original trilogy, I definitely as a child saw them through the lens of, okay, this is good versus bad. This is light versus dark. We have the good guys in this movie and they're fighting the bad guys, right? But as I got older, as my perspective changed and shifted, as it got broader and I started seeing deeper layers into life, all of this actually really exists in all of Star Wars, not just Andor. Andor just does so well at communicating it because our central character is so layered, right? Is so conflicted. Again, we always root for the protagonist, but what if that protagonist, like Andor, isn't as clear cut and dry good guy? And that's the beautiful thing about this show. Well, all of Star Wars really, and any good fiction, but particularly this show, and particularly of this character, Cassian Andor, right? It shows that there is no clear delineation between good and evil, and that it resides within the individual to choose, right? Right? And so given that this is a work of fiction and knowing that the source material comes from observation and experience, again, it's a reflection of us. It's a reflection that within each and every one of us lies that same dichotomy. If in Star Wars you see those acts of nobility and acts of heroism and you identify with them and you align with them and you see that within yourself, you also have to recognize that the acts of cruelty that you see in the movies and in the shows are also a part of you, just like Andor. To acknowledge this in oneself is to give oneself the choice and accept the responsibility. Which path we choose is up to us. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. What do you guys think? The dichotomy of good and evil residing in each and every one of us as a reflection, well, the other way around, residing in all of Star Wars and the characters within Star Wars, especially Cassian, and as a reflection of humanity, as a reflection of each and every one of us. I think, what we see on TV, what we see in movies, what we read in fiction and listen to in fiction, it really is all a reflection of who we all are. And if we take the time to really analyze and examine and think deeply and reflect deeply on these things, we see them we see beyond the simple story moving forward and the plot points. There's so much richness again in all of Star Wars, and especially this show Andor, that it warrants, I think, more than just kind of the mindless entertainment that sometimes it can get excused to be. There's so much more to the experience than shutting off your brain and going for a ride, right? And that's what this show is all about. So let me know what you guys think. Hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. It's at POTJ Podcast for both of those things. And of course, you can email us, send a message or even an MP3. I'd love to play that here on the show to info@pathofthejedi.com. All right, now it's time for the shout out. This week's shout out goes to my dear, dear friend out of Southern California, Mr. Eugene Hong. That's right, Eugene Hong. Eugene and I have been fast friends for, 15, 16 plus years now at this point. I mean, pretty much almost my entire network marketing career. He and I came up in this profession together. Neither of us really with the intention of ever, we never set out to become network marketers, you know what I mean? But at some point in our journeys, it became more and more, it just became like the right choice. And eventually, because of this profession, our paths crossed. It's just, we've been friends ever since, comrades in arms. Is that the saying? But what I love about Eugene is that he supported me along my journey every step of the way. When I was struggling and he had succeeded, when he had hit his stride, when he had hit momentum in his own organization and really in his own personal growth. That's what it equated to. He was always willing to just kind of keep me in his back pocket, as it were, right? And because he knew how much I struggled, right? He knew how difficult it was for me, not just in business, but just everything that was going on in my life. And it was just, regardless of the business relationship, regardless of what I was doing and what I was producing, Eugene never made me feel like, my output or my production was my value or my worth, right? He always valued my friendship. He always valued my brotherhood. And as a result, we've been friends and brothers, all these years. I mean, almost, we're going on 2 decades really soon. So, I just wanted to recognize him for that because, again, so when so many people, I've been in this profession of network marketing for 16 plus years, and so many people who I guess, for lack of a better word, called themselves my friend and who I was close to. Some friendships, I guess, aren't meant to last, right? And some friendships are built on things that aren't solid, or maybe the foundations that aren't as strong and lasting as the friendship and brotherhood that Eugene has built with me. And so I wanted to give a shout out to him on this show, because just for that, right? Just for being a brother, just for supporting me and always being kind of that rock that I've needed in my life, not just in my business, but in my life in general. So, Gene, I know you're out there listening to the show, brother. I appreciate everything that you do and continue to do for me, for my family, even if it's just being there, right? So, yeah, thanks, brother, for everything you do. I love you. I love your family. Give my love to everybody. This week's shout out goes to you. All right, so that's going to do it for today's episode. Again, please feel free to message us. Oh, well, before I forget, if you guys have anybody that you want to give a shout out to on the show, this is a huge segment of this show. Like I've done it since I think episode 2 or 3. So very early on in the show, we included this, and I want you guys, as much as possible, if you feel comfortable, to participate, because it's all about celebrating each other, right? I want to help you celebrate somebody, and show love to somebody that you want to show love to, and I think that's a great way to do that on this show. So if you have anybody you want to give a shout out to, please send us an email to info@pathofthejedi.com with shout out in the subject heading. Write out your message, or again, leave an MP3, record an MP3, and I'd love to play it on the show so that the individual that you want to give a shout out to can hear your voice. It's very personalized, all right? I would love that for you guys to do that. Send the message. I'll play it on the show, or I'll read your message here on the show. And yeah, it's just a fun segment, I think, that we can do to light each other's day. Light each other's day. Well, you guys know what I mean. It's a great way to just bring some light into each other's lives. So again, if you want to give a shout out to anybody in particular that you love or care about and want to celebrate, send shout out in the subject heading to info@pathofthejedi.com. Okay, so this is it. This is officially it for the episode. I know I always do that. There's always one more thing I got to talk about. Anyways, more to come from us. Obviously, we're going to continue on with Andor, episode 7 next week. Again, I hear it's absolutely amazing. It just gets better and better. So be on the lookout for that on Wednesday, unless anything comes up last minute. But expect us to be back on regular schedule next week, Wednesday, or Thursday, depending on what hemisphere you're on. But you you guys know what I mean. Wednesday next week, same bat channel, same bat time. And of course, look out for the new segment, Jedi Academy, on Monday, all here on Path of the Jedi. So we'll see you guys next week. Until then, be well, be safe, and may the Force be with you.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited, and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.